Hi, I'm Chris Wilson from Grinding Gear Games. Thanks for joining us for today's livestream as we reveal our upcoming expansion, The Forbidden Sanctum, which launches on December 9th on PC and Mac and on December 14th on console. Twitch drops are enabled on today's livestream, so make sure you follow the instructions below in order to claim your Bloodguard wings. Here's what you can expect from today's livestream. We'll start by debuting the trailer for The Forbidden Sanctum, and we'll then do a deep dive on the league itself. We'll cover this expansion's new endgame revamps and content, and then we'll have a look at all the new skills we're introducing. We'll then reveal some new unique items and the massive buffs and rarity adjustments we have made to a variety of endgame unique weapons. We'll then briefly cover some balance topics that we have posted articles about recently, jewels, curses, and the replacement of the arch-nemesis monster mod system. Finally, we'll discuss the upcoming release of the optional Ruthless game mode before touching on some quality of life improvements and the new supporter packs. The livestream concludes with a Q&A session between Ziggy D and me, where we'll answer questions from Twitch chat. Then we'll drop the full patch notes. Let's get started with the trailer for The Forbidden Sanctum, which launches in 1 week.
Many have met their fate here in the shade of Fell Shrine. So, step lightly. But here you are bound by new rules. My rules. Each step with gold to tempt you. A foe to wound you. A curse to spite you. But do not give up, for vast riches await the bold. Pillage this sanctum if you must. And one day you may uncover its secrets.
The Forbidden Sanctum is an old Templar enclave, long rumored to be hidden beneath the Fell Shrine ruins. Abandoned for a long time, it is now controlled by a malevolent entity. In this league, you'll explore it, find out its secrets, and deal with the evil that lurks there. The Sanctum Challenge League is a roguelike game, played out one room at a time as you explore Rayclast and the Atlas in Path of Exile. In every area or map you enter, you can make a choice of which room in the Sanctum you will explore next. On the Sanctum map, you can see the contents of a few rooms ahead, enabling you to plot a path through its dangerous halls. And the Sanctum is dangerous. Like most roguelikes, you should not expect to be able to complete it on your first try. Getting to the deeper floors requires experience, knowledge, and luck. You should expect that your early attempts will fail, but over time, you'll be able to push yourself farther and farther. As you progress deeper into the Sanctum, you'll find a variety of treasures that will help you eventually fight your way to the dangers that await you at the end of its 4 floors. Eventually, by endgame, you may be able to push through all 4 floors to face the final boss. Every roguelike needs a resource to help you track how well the run is going. In the Forbidden Sanctum, it is your resolve, indicated by this bar here. As you explore the Sanctum, your resolve is threatened by the dangers within. When you lose all of your resolve, your Sanctum run ends. Your level of resolve is maintained between consecutive rooms on your run, but is only shown when you're in the Sanctum itself. The resolve mechanic applies equally to all build archetypes. Your resolve is reduced when you are hit by monsters or environmental hazards in the Sanctum, and these telegraphed attacks are not affected by regular Path of Exile defensive mechanics, such as evasion, armor, or block. While these attacks do some nominal damage to your regular life, the bulk of their impact is against your resolve. This mechanic provides a mechanism for tracking your progress between rooms, where your regular life pool would long ago have been recovered. Another aspect of the resolve system is that characters who are struggling can be ejected from the Sanctum without actually having to die, avoiding experience loss or hardcore death. So maintaining a healthy level of resolve is key as you navigate the Sanctum, and that means making careful choices of what rooms you enter. Let's have a look at some of the things that Sanctum rooms can contain. Afflicted rooms cause you to gain an affliction when you enter them. Afflictions make your Sanctum run more difficult, for example, reducing your resolve recovery, causing rewards to become hidden on the Sanctum map, or causing Sanctum rooms to spawn volatile anomalies that follow you. These minor afflictions accumulate as you get deeper and deeper into a run, making it more challenging. Major afflictions exist and are a big deal. They have significant consequences, such as entirely preventing the recovery of resolve. So, a Sanctum run gets harder and harder as you pick up more afflictions. Sounds great. But every roguelike needs a way for you to gain power throughout your run. In the Forbidden Sanctum, that system is boons. Boons are beneficial buffs that help you as you progress through the Sanctum. Minor boons make things a little easier, such as slowing down monsters or adding a special shield to your resolve called Inspiration. Major boons don't come along often, but have large effects, such as preventing you from receiving more minor afflictions, or recovering your resolve to 50% the next time you run out. Due to the vast variety of afflictions and boons, no two runs are the same. Generally speaking, your best Sanctum runs are the ones where the afflictions you choose have little effect on you, and the boons either counteract them or have a large benefit for the strategy you're running. Some rooms in the Sanctum contain a fountain which will restore some of your lost resolve. Others contain afflicted fountains that restore even more resolve at a cost. Rooms with a treasure reward contain chests full of the Templar Aureus currency, a type of gold coin they used for commerce within their Sanctum. You'll also find some Aureus coins from monsters that you kill as you explore. These are picked up automatically, like Azurite, and are not tradable, and like your afflictions and boons, are lost when your Sanctum run ends. Some rooms contain a merchant who accepts your Aureus coins in exchange for boons. Plan your purchases carefully, as you may encounter the merchant again later on with even more expensive boons to purchase. Occasionally, the sinister powers controlling the Sanctum will present you with the choice of making an accursed pact. You are given several pacts to choose from and can even opt to take all that you are offered. All pacts have a big upside and a big downside, such as exchanging a portion of your maximum resolve for a random major boon. It's very dangerous to make a pact, but if you pick the right circumstances, your gamble could pay off. In addition to rewards that help you progress through the Sanctum, many rooms let you immediately receive Path of Exile currency items, but with a twist. Whenever you're offered some currency items that you can receive right away, you are also offered a more valuable option that will be waiting for you after the boss fight at the end of the current floor of the Sanctum. It's a gamble, because if you fail your run before you reach and defeat the boss, you will not receive the reward you picked. Later on, you're offered the extreme temptation of getting a massive currency reward that is conditional on completing your entire Sanctum run without failing. At a specific point in the Forbidden Sanctum storyline, you'll discover a special altar that Templar relics can be placed on. These relics directly affect your Sanctum runs and are not lost when a run ends. They persist throughout the League as a permanent source of meta progression. Acquiring new and better relics is one of the ways you can push farther and farther with each run you try. Relics cannot be crafted and cannot be traded, as they represent your personal progression throughout the League. You'll accumulate more than you can use simultaneously, so you'll have options to fine-tune your strategy from run to run. You can store your extra relics in the Relic Locker, a free storage space like the Expedition Locker. We don't want to spoil important story details, but the end boss of the Forbidden Sanctum can drop unique items from a pool exclusive to this League. Today we'd like to show you a unique amulet called Eternal Damnation. This amulet offers a powerful way to gain additional elemental mitigation by introducing the concept of elemental damage reduction. Despite the drawback of reducing your maximum resistances, if you have sufficient chaos resistance, this is more than compensated for. Because of the roguelike nature of the Forbidden Sanctum, defeating the boss of a floor is a difficult achievement and hence rewards a lot of experience. You may fail on the way, so if you do manage it, expect a good experience boost for your achievement. Another reward you can find is a special type of relic called a Sanctified Relic that has mods that directly affect your character's build. You can only unlock one slot for this type of relic, and while these relics can't be crafted through conventional means, you may find special reward rooms in the Sanctum that can modify them. These relics exist for this league only and provide a boost to character power for players who are able to master the Sanctum. The Sanctum League offers a roguelike experience that tempts you into taking risks and rewards you if those pay off. There's a lot to explore in the Sanctum, and we can't wait to hear about your experiences next week. In each expansion leading up to Path of Exile 2's release, we're improving Path of Exile's endgame, with new content to explore and improvements to how you customize your endgame experience. In the Forbidden Sanctum expansion, we're revamping the Atlas tree, reworking how Eldritch Altars function, and are introducing 2 new Atlas memories. The Atlas tree is generally working really well, but has a few problems we'd like to address. The tree offers you the ability to specialize in killing pinnacle bosses, providing extra rewards when you do so. While this sounds good on paper, it creates a situation where you're incentivized to specialize your tree for regular mapping, save up all of your boss fights, then respec fully into boss mode, and then do all of your saved up boss fights before speccing back again. Ideally, the design of the Atlas tree would let you spec into one build and then just play the game. We have removed all boss bonuses from the Atlas tree, and have baked some of them into the actual base properties of the boss fights. For example, you don't need to allocate the Gaze into the Abyss notable that makes the Elder more likely to drop a Watcher's Eye, as he just has that drop chance built in now. The Atlas tree is now focused on allowing you to specialize into content that you encounter in every map. We also want you to be able to specialize into your favorite leagues even more deeply on the Atlas tree. For each of the 10 leagues that the tree lets you disable, we've added a bunch more passives to the tree. These new passives allow you to increase the league's spawn chance to much higher levels than currently possible and juice the league even further than before. We are making a number of changes to Eldritch Altars that mostly affect their rewards, but will also affect gameplay decisions you make involving them. Some of the key changes include splitting up the basic currency, Scarab, and Divination card rewards to be explicit in their description of what rewards you'll get. For example, instead of map bosses dropping 3 unknown basic currency items, the altar specifically says which currency item they'll drop. As part of this change, we've removed some of the lower value yet quite common currency rewards from the pool, such as Orbs of Augmentation and Orbs of Transmutation. Speaking of Scarabs, these will be less available from altars, but we've improved their availability elsewhere to offset this. Rusted Scarabs can now drop from the core drop pool, and we've added a vendor recipe that allows you to upgrade your Scarabs up to Gilded using the normal 3:1 ratio. You can also perform this action from your Fragment tab using the new upgrade button. We have made reward types exclusive to different influences, so that you know which influence type to invest in if you want to target farm a certain reward. To give you a specific example, if you run maps influenced by, say, Eater of Worlds, you'll see Divine Orbs from the basic currency reward more than twice as often as before. We've also rebalanced rewards so that choices that affect boss drops or influence monster drops are comparatively more valuable. The Wrath of the Cosmos keystone has been reworked. Previously, it was so rewarding that players felt obligated to use it despite its extreme level of difficulty. It has retained the risk versus reward element, but with the overall intensity toned down. You can now also get Awakened Gems from defeating Maven Witness map bosses. This additional reward helps further balance the expected returns from the various types of influence. For more detail on these changes, check out the Balance Manifesto we posted last week, or the upcoming patch notes. In the Lake of Calandra expansion, we introduced Atlas Memories. When applied to your Atlas, they unlock a sequence of maps that tells the story of an NPC's past. These stories manifest as specialized encounters that involve a new challenge and exciting rewards. In this expansion, we've introduced 2 new Atlas Memories, describing events related to Beastry and Domination. The Beastry memory line allows you to capture harvest monsters as beasts for your menagerie. These harvest beasts can be used in 9 new beast crafting recipes. These recipes cover an array of options. For example, you can remove one of the special modifiers from a Watcher's Eye Jewel and then add another. This can have potent results, but won't affect the life, mana, or energy shield modifiers. You can re-roll an Awakened Gem from one type to another. Another example is that you can also re-roll a Synthesis Implicit modifier. If your item has more than one Synthesis Implicit, it will randomly re-roll one of them. The Domination Atlas memory thrusts you into a tale of pantheon gods that stand watch over their shrines. Like regular shrines, these are guarded by monsters and emit a buff that empowers the monsters until you claim that buff for yourself. This Atlas memory introduces a new set of shrines with specialized buffs, guarded by rare monsters that drop tantalizing rewards. The Forbidden Sanctum expansion introduces a new type of shard that can drop from Harbingers, fracturing shards. When combined together into a full currency item, you get the Fracturing Orb, which behaves the same as the Fracturing Craft from Harvest. It can be used on any rare item with at least 4 modifiers. When the orb is applied, it locks one of the modifiers in place so that further crafting efforts do not affect that modifier. Items fractured in this way can only have one fractured modifier. Previously, this crafting option was gated behind the Oshabi fight in Harvest. Now that it has been rehomed to Harbinger, the Harvest crafting option is no longer available. This means that you'll be able to use your Harvest Life Force and Oshabi kills on other crafts. Because fracturing shards drop from Harbingers, you'll be able to target farm them by speccing into Harbinger content on your Atlas tree. The Forbidden Sanctum expansion introduces a number of new skill gems. In addition to some new melee Val skills we'll discuss later in the livestream, there are 2 totally new skills that we'd like to unveil today. Volcanic Fissure is a new fiery slam skill that can be used with staves, maces, axes, and unarmed attacks. Strike the ground to create a chasm that winds towards your target. This chasm can path around corners before erupting as the fissure gets as close as it can reach. It releases a burst of fiery projectiles that explode on striking the ground. Enemies hit by multiple impacts will take a lot of stacked damage. Use it up close for reliable bursts of damage, or aim far away to damage a larger area. Frozen Legion is an unusual spell, summoning a ring of icy statues that attack with your own weapon damage. This skill has multiple cooldown stacks and consumes all cooldown uses at once to summon a statue for each available cooldown. The statues perform a sweeping ice slash, and these sweeps can overlap, resulting in multiple hits against targets close to you. This spell can be used with staves, maces, and axes. The skill is particularly powerful with slow, heavy weapons, as while the statues will use your attack speed, you should instead prioritize the spell's own cast time and cooldown. This expansion also introduces many new Val melee skills. As you know, equipping a Val skill gem grants you both the Val and regular version of the skill. As you kill enemies, the gem charges up with their souls, and after a certain number are collected, the Val skill can be used once. Most of the new Val skills introduced in this expansion are melee skills, and this results in an indirect buff to any melee builds that use one of these skills. Where previously you'd just be using your melee skill to kill enemies, you now get to periodically use a super-powered version of the skill. If you like Flicker Strike, you'll love Val Flicker Strike, as it really dials up the concept of letting fate take the wheel. Val Flicker Strike causes you to flicker dozens of extra times, slashing enemies. During this time, you don't deal any damage to the enemies you slash. You're quite vulnerable due to not leeching or generating fortify stacks. When you finish flickering, if you survived of course, you'll be rewarded with a single huge hit of damage against each enemy you slashed. Val Cleave is a new Val skill that buffs the behavior of its non-Val version, in a similar way to how Val Reeve works. Val Cleave triggers 2 buffs, one when you kill a rare enemy, and one when you kill either a rare or unique enemy. The latter is a strong buff to regular Cleave, which you can keep up almost permanently if you're able to kill rare or unique enemies often enough. The bonus for killing a rare enemy is that you get to steal its mods for a time. You can enjoy part of the power of having a headhunter without actually needing to find one. Overall, Val Cleave is a pretty powerful upgrade to any melee build that could run Cleave. That +2 radius buff is looking pretty good now, right? Don't hurt me. We'll showcase the other new Val skills we're introducing over the coming week. The Forbidden Sanctum expansion introduces over 15 new unique items, from Sanctum exclusive uniques to ones that can be found from Path of Exile's pinnacle bosses. I'd like to show you 3 examples of these, designed by winners of our prior league's boss kill races. Progenesis is a unique amethyst flask that was designed by Ben and drops from the Uber Maven. It's a defensive flask that grants a mini version of the Petrified Blood effect, but without requiring you to be on low life. This is a useful tool to prevent you getting one-shot by large amounts of incoming damage in scary situations. Rational Doctrine is a unique jewel that was designed by Rawlings and drops from Uber Venarius. By manipulating your attributes, you can change how this jewel behaves. While the ideal dream outcome is that you manage to get your strength and intelligence tied for highest, enabling both of the benefits simultaneously, the jewel is still very powerful if it only grants your choice of permanent consecrated ground or permanent profane ground. Entropic Devastation is a pair of unique gloves that were designed by Gucci Pradas and dropped from the Uber Shaper. Currently, the ways to get Spell Impale are very limited. These gloves provide the powerful property of causing all of your spells to impale on crit. So let's talk about unique weapons, specifically endgame unique weapons. In many ways, the weapon is the most iconic and important item on a character, so it's very important that we make them exciting and worthy of their unique status. While some unique weapons have special properties that enable entirely new builds, others are best compared to powerful rare items as a primary source of your character's damage. We have to be very careful when pitching the power level of these unique weapons. If they're not powerful enough, then they're useless and are ignored, but if they're too powerful, then they discourage entire archetypes of characters from trying to find or craft rare weapons. Interestingly, the above problem doesn't apply to belts. Despite Mageblood and Headhunter both existing as extremely powerful unique items, people still craft plenty of rare belts. That's because Mageblood and Headhunter are extremely rare, and people don't actually expect they'll reliably get one in a league. Players tend to treat them as luxury upgrades to their build, rather than something they're certain to get. In this expansion, we're promoting 10 iconic but underused unique weapons to the same tier of rarity as Mageblood and Headhunter. We are buffing them a gigantic amount and are making them incredibly hard to find. Remember when Starforge used to be an exciting item? Well, after this change, it certainly is again. It still drops exclusively from the Shaper and the Uber Shaper, but it'll take a lot of runs or a lot of luck to earn it. Over the next week, we'll reveal the other unique weapons that have been massively buffed. We have targeted around 10 iconic underused unique weapons and have generally buffed only their damage stat, but by a lot. We've made a number of changes to jewels that are covered in a recent balance manifesto, but in case you missed it, we want to quickly summarize what the changes are. In the Forbidden Sanctum expansion, we have made jewels a better source of ailment mitigation by buffing the values of ailment-focused jewel modifiers and adding new modifiers that enable mitigation to a wider variety of ailments than before. We have also removed some ailment mitigation modifiers that were only available on jewels through corruption because there are now better options through the regular jewel mod pool. This also means that other desirable corruption modifiers, like immunity to corrupting blood, are more likely to roll. We want the moment of finding a unique jewel to be way more exciting than it currently is. We've added a handful of new, very powerful unique jewels and have removed some old, less interesting ones. An example of one of these new unique jewels is Fire Song, which propagates any modifiers to your ignite mitigation to other elemental ailments. If you're able to substantially reduce the duration of ignites on you, then you can use Fire Song to basically shrug off any elemental ailment. For full information about the other changes to unique jewels, check out the Balance Manifesto post we made recently. We've rebalanced curses to make them stronger where they matter most against unique monsters and pinnacle bosses. We have buffed several Hex-related unique items and reworked unique items that previously interacted with Doom. To replace the Doomsday Keystone passive, we have brought back a version of an iconic curse-related keystone from the past. We've introduced some powerful new unique items that interact with hexes, which we'll reveal in the lead up to launch. For more details on changes to curses, check out the Balance Manifesto we posted recently, or the patch notes that will come out after the livestream concludes. When we first created the Arch-Nemesis monster mod system, our goal was to improve Path of Exile's outdated set of monster mods with new and interesting mechanics that have modern game balance. We feel that Arch-Nemesis did introduce a lot of interesting mechanics, but it unfortunately had several of its own problems. We have replaced Arch-Nemesis with a system that is more similar to the way monster mods worked in the past. The new monster mods are a lot simpler. They now each do one thing and very clearly state what they do. Each encounter with a rare monster is now less complex and is easier to understand in the heat of combat compared to Arch-Nemesis. You'll still encounter challenging combinations of mods from time to time, but this emergent synergy will be rarer than it was under Arch-Nemesis. The goal is that combat is interesting and varied, with moments that get your heart racing, but without the frustrations of the Arch-Nemesis system. Let's talk about rewards. Under Arch-Nemesis, it often felt mandatory to bring in a magic find culling character to kill some monsters for you in order to maximize your rewards. In the new system, we've added a significant pool of new rewards to rares, but the reward that is on the monster is hidden and not associated with a specific mod, so you don't know what kind of rewards you will get until you kill the monster. Rare monsters with more mods are more likely to have these special hidden reward bonuses. To find out more about other balance changes that are taking place in the Forbidden Sanctum, check out the patch notes, which will be available when the livestream ends. Over the last year or so, some of our senior developers have been tinkering with a more challenging way to play Path of Exile. We've been publicly alpha testing this mode, known as Ruthless, for the last month, and are planning to make it available to anyone who's interested alongside the launch of the Forbidden Sanctum next week. Ruthless is an optional additional character flag like Hardcore or Solo Self-Found that completely changes how Path of Exile feels to play. Ruthless is a lot more difficult than regular Path of Exile, but it doesn't achieve this by making the monsters harder to kill. It instead focuses on reducing character power through extreme item scarcity, limited crafting, and many other changes such as support gems being drop only. We've posted an article about the philosophy and rules of Ruthless on pathofexile.com/ruthless. We plan to release this mode alongside the Forbidden Sanctum expansion in a week. In addition to being a character flag like Hardcore or Solo Self-Found, it's also available as a modifier for private leagues. To be clear, the Forbidden Sanctum League content can be played in Ruthless with appropriately balanced rewards. Ruthless is still very experimental during 320, and we won't be afraid to make mid-league balance changes to it during this experimental phase. Ruthless is not for everyone, but so far it has found a supportive and growing group of players who enjoy the additional challenge that it brings. If it sounds like something you're interested in, then try it out next time you're looking for a new way to enjoy Path of Exile. This expansion also contains a number of small quality of life improvements. Some examples are, Divine Vessels can now be used by right-clicking them rather than taking them to Sin. On the player overhead life bar, the energy shield bar is split into a separate bar. You can now right-click an itemized Temple of Atsuatl to see its layout. And most importantly, beast crafting recipes that add mods to flasks now actually say what the mods do. We'll post more information about these and other quality of life improvements in the lead up to release. Today we're launching 2 new series of supporter packs, the Forge and Gemling packs. Each tier contains the pack's full face value in points plus several exclusive microtransactions. These packs will only be available for the duration of the Sanctum Challenge League and will leave the store forever in 3 months. As always, these microtransactions are entirely cosmetic and do not affect your character's progression or power. The Forge series of supporter packs contains 6 exclusive microtransactions. The Clockwork back attachment ramps up as you build a kill streak, building pressure and releasing it when your streak ends. The Delirious Hideout decoration lets you summon delirium fog in your hideout at will, complete with strange voices and terrifying apparitions.
Feeling okay? You're looking a little pale, Exile.
The Forge Guard armor set summons a hammer and anvil so that everyone nearby can watch you craft. The Ethereal Fusing effect turns your item linking attempts into a spectator sport. If you manage to hit a 6 link, people watching are even prompted to send a congratulatory message. Summoning the Crow Storm portal effect causes a murder of crows to erupt from the portal. The portal becomes dormant if you are too far away from it, causing the crows to take to the skies. The High Templar weapon effect smites the undead you fight and scours the souls of those you put to rest. The Gemling Pack series also has 6 exclusive microtransactions. The Beehive weapon effect lets your weapon play host to a swarm of angry bees, which erupt from the hive whenever you hit an enemy with the weapon. Critical hits cause the hive to send out its best warriors. The Stampede Quicksilver Flask makes you the leader of your own personal rower herd. Activating the flask causes a host of ghostly rowers to charge alongside you. This is the Gemling Artificer armor set. It is inlaid with gems that match the gems you've socketed in your items. Crafting gems with Gemcutter's prisms, Val orbs, or regrading lenses visualizes the process for all to see. This armor set also includes alternate gem level up effects. Prospero's Ring blesses you with a constant shower of coins, and it helps you thank players you've traded with through a hearty fist bump. The Consuming Ooze pet bounces alongside you and devours corpses in your wake, spitting out a tidy pile of bones. Finally, this pack allows you to reunite with Kadiro Perandus, inviting him to your hideout as a vendor. In addition to buying items from you and using his connections to accept your divination cards, he'll provide commentary on your goods, equipment, and anything else he sees fit to judge you for.
That might be a little too much to drink, even for me.
Kadiro has hundreds of lines of voice acting.
What? Oh, a mighty headhunter. I'm so impressed. Try to duck when the brain fragments splatter everywhere. You wouldn't want to sully your armor.
These new packs are available right now at pathofexile.com/purchase. Purchases like these directly fund the ongoing development of Path of Exile 1 and 2, and we really appreciate your support. Meanwhile, the Knight and Rogue packs leave the store forever in 1 week, so now's your last chance to purchase them. The Calandra edition of Kirik's Vault Pass is only available until the end of the Calandra League, and will be replaced with a new set of unique items when the Forbidden Sanctum launches. By the way, we're hoping to film Season 11 of Build of the Week once the Forbidden Sanctum comes out. If you want to submit your build for the season, share your build guide on the class forums on pathofexile.com. Next up, we've got the Q&A with Ziggy D. Once that ends, we'll post the full patch notes for the Forbidden Sanctum. Over the next week, our community team will post the expansion's challenge rewards, information on how to update your item filters, all new and changed gems, and information on how to prepare for launch. On launch weekend, we expect to release the new mystery box, and we'll follow up with the new Kirik's Vault Pass in the days after launch. Thanks for joining us and checking out the Forbidden Sanctum. We can't wait to join you in Rayclast on December 9th. We'll begin the Q&A shortly, so please get your questions ready in chat.
Good morning, Exiles, and welcome back for another Q&A session with none other than Chris Wilson. Good morning, Chris. Thank you for joining us once again.
Oh, thanks for being here as well.
I'm very keen to jump into chatting about Forbidden Sanctum straight away, but as always, you folks can put your questions in the chat, and our helpful team of moderators will pull some out for us to answer. So, Path of Exile gets to be so many things. It has gotten to be so many things over the years. Do you ever really feel like you just don't need to make another game in any other genre because you can just make a league that is that genre? Like make a farming league or a city building league or a roguelike league?
I guess it's one perk of the job, but we always try to make sure that when we're designing our leagues, they're games that fit within the idea of being an action RPG. Like they have to involve you killing monsters and finding items in order to fit within Path of Exile.
Yeah, so even when you're farming, you're killing monsters, or even when you're fishing, you're killing monsters.
Yeah, there's
the one where we pull
bit of
monsters
an agenda
out of the
there,
water.
Ziggy.
I was planning on pushing the fishing angle.
So that's when you get on the boat and have your fishing league, right?
And you like pull monsters out of the water, right? Like giant fish that you then battle with as they flop around on the deck. That
Interesting. That one's under NDA. Sorry.
Oh, I'm in trouble. How do you gain access to the new Forbidden Sanctum?
So basically, every area you're playing in has a portal that gives you access to it. It basically takes you to the next room that you're playing in the Sanctum in your current run.
Ah, okay. So to clarify then, the Sanctum's divided into rooms, each with their own encounter, and then floors with a boss at the end of each. And then there's the whole Sanctum itself, which is multiple floors?
That's right. So the Sanctum itself has 4 floors, each one guarded by a boss at the end with the ultimate boss fight at the end of the 4th floor. And each of the floors has 8 rooms. And so a maximum length Sanctum run would be 32 consecutive rooms, which you'd play out over potentially 32 maps. But it's worth emphasizing that, as with most roguelikes, you don't just install it and then happily play through to the end in one go. It's something that you get further and further with each run as you get better meta progression, as you learn more about it, and as you have good versus bad runs.
I presume it like level scales to the character kind of as you're leveling still, as per regular leagues. Is there any potential, do you think, that someone who's like quite good at the game maybe gets through on their first try, or is this quite definitely you're going to have to make it a bit further each time?
We never underestimate the players, right? Like we will try as hard as we can to achieve something, and then players will just blow right past that because there are millions of them and they're pretty damn good at the game. So I don't want to make any promises there, but It certainly is the case that in order to get really deep into the Sanctum, you have to know a lot about it. You have to have some experience with it. You have to ideally have a good character with a capable build. You'd ideally have a good setup of your relics, which are the meta progression. To get to the deeper floors, it certainly requires that you've assembled relics that fit with your strategy. And it also helps to be having a good run. I can't emphasize that enough. It's very roguelike, where you're picking up these random boons, these random afflictions. And if you get the bad afflictions on you early on, that run is not going to last long. If you get a really good set of boons, you could have a really deep run, much further than you otherwise would at your current level.
This is so you mentioned like 30 something rooms. That's like the biggest thing we've had by a pretty substantial margin. Because even building the temple was around 11 maps to build a full temple and then run that. And that was like, that's a pretty sizable thing. So this is a lot bigger than that then.
That's correct. But a lot of the rewards you're getting along the way. And so it's entirely fine to play the Sanctum a few floors in and then fail and play again. And it's still a rewarding experience, assuming you don't gamble on pushing the rewards right to the end of the entire Sanctum run. But it's unlikely you're going to choose to do that until you are really confident in your ability to do this run particularly well.
Yeah, so I saw the reward options are like take a tiny reward now, take a decent reward at the end of the floor. So you're like, oh, I can make it 3 or 4 more rooms. And then there's the really big one at the end as well. And there's stack right if you get a bunch of them.
That's right. And it was kind of funny because in the live stream I said this is a massive reward and we're showing like a few chaos orbs as the reward. So of course, chat memed that as much as they could. The thing is, okay, so let's do some math here, right? It's 32 rooms in a Sanctum run, and deferrals make up something like 40%. Deferral is what I'm internally calling the offer reward here. It makes up around 40% of the rooms. And so if you're offered an average of a whole bunch of chaos orbs, I think the example there had like 18, but obviously the currency numbers will vary a lot, and you were to defer those entirely to the end of the Sanctum run, you would be getting hundreds of currency. And it can have divines, mirrors, and various other stuff in there moderately rarely. So it's entirely possible that were you to defer everything to the end in a big gamble, you could receive a very, very large payout. Now, of course, deferring it to the end of the Sanctum is a crazy strategy. We don't recommend that. It will end in tears. Only do this if you're confident in this run. It's set up so that the rewards for immediately taking them are still worthwhile. If you play the Sanctum and just took the reward immediately, it's a decent amount of currency that makes it worthwhile on top of the other rewards you're getting. But there's always the temptation of the end of the floor. The floor one is the one that's juiced a little bit. Of course, in later floors, the end of the Sanctum doesn't look very far away. And if you know you're having a good run, you've got confidence, then why not take the extra reward by doing the big gamble?
This deferral mechanic is super interesting, actually, because you've designed leagues where you get like some reward immediately, and then you've designed leagues where you do like a lot of content and then get a ton of rewards all at once. So this allows players to have control over that mechanic and make that decision for themselves. But have you like kind of... Yeah, sorry.
I was just going to say, this is because roguelikes have good runs and bad runs. If you're having a bad run, take the rewards now and get as far as you can. If you're having a great run, that gives you the ability to make an ultimatum-like gamble.
Yeah, right. You can make those strategic decisions kind of based on like, this has been a brutal slog. I am no way am I getting through this. I'm going to check out now. Got it. Makes sense. Have you thought about like the player mindset of just like, I always going to take the big one? Because I look at it and I'm like, I'm always going to take the one. And I'm the biggest one. I'm never going to get it because I'm always going to die.
Obviously, players want to min-max stuff. They want to get the best result. But the best result may pragmatically say, I'm going to take this reward that's in a shorter time frame. Plus, okay, so anyone who's done economics or finance understands the concept of the time value of money. $1 now is worth more than $1 later because you can put it to use right now. And when these full Sanctum runs taking 30 maps, maybe getting a pile of chaoses, potentially some higher currency like exalts and divines, a few maps from now is actually better for your character development than getting a very large pile in 20 maps. Maybe, especially when there's a conditional element to that. It may be that getting something a few maps from now that you can then trade to get more progression is actually better for you. So there are a lot of hard decisions which we put on the table here for the players.
Damn, I'm gonna have to dig out my old economics textbooks.
Okay. Excel, right?
Yeah, now you're speaking our language. Let's talk the resolve mechanic. So to clarify, resolve is an independent health bar for the Forbidden Sanctum specifically. And when your resolve runs out, you're kicked out of the Sanctum dead or not, right?
That's correct. Now, I noticed the reaction when we're announcing the resolve system there is a lot of players said, why? As though this is a negative thing. But I want to have a chance to explain it. So we tried very hard initially to work out a system here that works with your player life. Then there's no additional bars. The problem is, though, Path of Exile's player life fluctuates up and down rapidly. You're constantly healing yourself. You've got recovery. There's no persistence to this. Your player life is like how out of breath you are, if you see what I mean. It's a very brief, it's almost like your heartbeat to some extent. And so if we were to say, look, if you lose some life in this room, then when you come back into the next room, that life is going to be missing. So you've got a kind of a progression through the sanctum. Then they just press 1 and heal themselves fully and carry on playing. And so our experiments where there's no meta progression in it do not function as a roguelike. There has to be a thing where you get worn down. Having said that, half of the plan here, half of the strategy you have to do in your sanctum is work out how you are recovering your resolve. And there are lots of different ways. It's along the lines, I mean, it's as simple as if your resolve is lower than you'd like because the sanctum one is one you're struggling with, then you have to start pathing through various things like fountains or choosing boons which enable more resolve recovery. And every time you have to choose something focusing on resolve recovery, you're implicitly losing some other thing you could be getting, like more rewards or a different axis of power. And so the degree to which you're struggling with the run forces you to focus on staying alive and not getting rewards. But conversely, this means if you're having a good run where you are not struggling at all, you can just kind of ignore your resolve and focus on becoming super powerful. And this works really well as a roguelike. And I would really encourage people to try it out before judging it based on the fact that it's an additional life bar. We don't add those kind of things, for no reason. And it means as well that you don't have as much pressure on your actual player life. And it's very interesting how build agnostic this is, because it creates a situation where different Path of Exile players can experience the Sanctum in similar ways, despite the fact their builds play quite differently.
This is why this Q&A is super good to do, because you get a chance to explain this, like how you arrived at this design decision that you can't really do in the reveal, because it would bog down the reveal for like 10 minutes. So that's super interesting. You actually touched on a topic I wanted to ask. So Resolve seems to reward high mobility play styles that can completely avoid attacks. So since mitigation doesn't affect resolve damage, how does it feel playing like a low mobility tanky melee character in the Sanctum? Won't you kind of just be failing runs due to chip damage that otherwise is not a threat to you?
We thought of that. So we've made it so that the resolve damage is lower if you're close to a target. Essentially, if you're melee and you're right in their face, then you take less resolve damage than if you're further away. And so attacks are also very telegraphed. And that means that even if you're a tanky melee character, you have an opportunity to get out of the way. You probably should consider at least a Quicksilver Flask if you're going into the Sanctum so that you have some ability to respond to stuff, but that's normal Path of Exile play. Even in Ruthless, where there's significantly less mobility skills, Quicksilver Flasks still exist. The other thing is, if your build is one where you're expecting to take a lot of resolve damage, just spec your relics into resolve recovery. Relics are your meta progression that you can choose. They're locked in for the Sanctum run, and you keep them between runs. So if you feel that you want more resolve recovery, get relics that do that. And if you're a character that's given up mobility, has some ability at the expense of maybe less damage or less tankiness or something, then there are other things they can specialize their relics into if they have enough resolve.
That taking less damage at close range thing is super interesting. Is that like kind of a fast shot mechanic applied to projectile attacks or something?
It's like that for all of the resolve stuff, and this is
Yeah.
something that we've realized is necessary because the melee and tanky characters get up close, and so it's better for that to be balanced around it.
All right, cool. And just to clarify for people, if you are playing hardcore, this means you can fail the Sanctum without dying. So I was like, I thought that was
That's
a very
correct.
hardcore league.
Right. The intention of the Forbidden Sanctum is that you will fail your Sanctum many, many times on the path to finding all of the good stuff in it. And so if that meant the hardcore character was dead and had to start again, it just wouldn't be a hardcore compatible league. And
Yep.
so a side effect of Resolve is that hardcore characters can actually engage with it without putting themselves in mortal danger. It also means, of course, with the way that experience penalties work, high-level characters can play without putting their current experience so much on the line. I mean, it's still very... I mean, I've died in the Sanctum numerous occasions with legitimate player life deaths because I was careless, but
Mm.
it's certainly easier from a player life point of view than, say, high-level mapping is.
Well, that kind of speaks to the concept of Resolve as a whole. Resolve is about how well you've done over the course of the entire dungeon, whereas your health is how well you've done in this specific engagement, which is an interesting kind of like two-faceted approach that we don't normally have in Path of Exile. Like if you do bad at the start of a map, it doesn't matter. It doesn't affect the rest of the map, right?
Yeah, and it's also meant that if we want something to be dangerous, we up the resolve a bit. We don't up its damage, threatening the actual characters.
Interesting. Cool. All right. So to clarify on the sanctified relics, these are the ones where the effects work on your character outside of the sanctum.
That's correct. Yeah, both inside and outside. So these are a permanent power progression for characters. They're hard to get. They're very end game. We're talking late maps here, and they're obviously due to the fact that they can't be crafted and can't be traded means that you are very limited in how many of these you get access to. but they are very powerful. And because of the fact that they can't be crafted or traded, we've made sure to juice the mods on them and make sure it's not watered down. These are relics which will significantly affect the character power of your build. Now, they are shared among all the characters on your account, or meaning you can equip, from the same pool. So it does mean that if you find one for one character and you want to use it on a different build, it's entirely possible to.
Very cool. How does the Sanctum work in a party then?
Okay. Got a bunch of rules here. Short answer is, as with all recent leagues, we want party play to work, but we also want it so that people don't feel encouraged to cheese things through party play. And so the philosophy basically is, like, one of the problems with Arch Nemesis, with the whole culling situation, is that players realize when they find a certain monster that, oh, I now have to engage with other humans in order to get maximum result here. And we want Sanctum to work in a party without creating the feeling that you have to engage with humans in order to get the best out of your Sanctum. It shouldn't feel like you only want to go in there when you have a whole bunch of friends who are online at the same time. So we've come up with rules that enable you to play as a party, and certainly there are some benefits for doing so, but there is also some liability to it. And so the way it works is the Sanctum is always that of the map owner. The person who created the map is the one whose Sanctum you are playing. So if Ziggy and I are playing and we're doing Ziggy's Sanctum, he's the one getting the progress for that. I'm there to help, and afterwards it would be nice if he reciprocated and we did my Sanctum as well, but it's primarily your one that's progressing. And so this means that you are the one who makes the choices about stuff. This is the one, it's your relics matter there. We're using your gold, your boons, your afflictions, and your resolve bar. That's the important thing to note. If you invite other party members into your Sanctum with you, they don't just get a free ability to have their own resolve bar, which doesn't matter, or they can run around and distract the monsters. You are, as a party, sharing the resolve bar with the map owner. And this means that extra party members can't just go and suicide themselves on stuff to distract the monsters. They actually have to be playing properly. Party member deaths do not end the current run, so if they happen to die legitimately, that doesn't screw up what you're doing. There's a bunch of other small rules there, like party members can view the merchant and view the map, but only the map owner actually makes the choices and purchases stuff. In practice, what this means is it's fun to bring people in and play together. It does give you a small advantage from a combat point of view if you have multiple players, but you do all have to be playing cohesively, so only bring in party members you trust. You can also drop party members in and out, so by that I mean, I can play this room with Ziggy and the next one with someone else, and because it's sharing my resources, that's compatible without having to have like a party resolve bar that's reserved for a specific group of people and so on.
All right. So if I bring a viewer in and they want to sabotage me, they can run in front of all the monsters.
Yep.
Great.
That would be hilarious. You guys should do that.
Please. Please. Okay. We got a couple of chat questions on the mechanics here specifically as well. Also, I just wanted to add another one. When you die in the Sanctum via resolve death,
yes,
and your character flops on the ground like a fish, are you fully protected from taking any damage from any source, dots, anything like that? You guys have checked, right?
Yes. I checked this yesterday. The list of things you are I'll read it to you. Cannot be damaged. Minions take no actions. You have grace period. Dealt no damage. Minions have no damage. Minions cannot be damaged. There's a whole bunch of stuff.
Good. Okay, cool. Excellent. I just had to make 100% sure. We didn't want any people I fell over in the Sanctum and then I died when I couldn't control my character. So, good. Excellent. Losing a resolve death, TK Hectic asks, is your XP lost or is your XP protected?
My belief is, correct me if I'm, so that was the dev check. You don't lose experience if you fail out through to resolve. And that's because it isn't actually a death. It doesn't increase the deaths count. You don't lose experience. You don't lose hardcore characters. It's entirely basically fainting and being ejected.
Gotcha. Malik asks, do we need to interact with the league mechanic every zone, or can we somehow build them up or save them to run them all at once?
You do interact with it in every zone, and it's not a particularly long encounter. These aren't very large rooms, but yes, you should interact with every zone.
Yeah, sometimes you would probably just portal in and click a fountain and leave, right? And then go back to your map?
The structure is that every room, so the basic way it works is you take the portal and you appear in a small antechamber, which enables you to make a choice. You click on the map, have a look at what the options are of where you want to go next. You can look a few ahead and you lock in a choice. And then a door, one of the 3 doors, or up to 3 doors in that room slides open. So you go through. Now you're in the actual main Sanctum room. So you do whatever the objective is in there, which may be just getting to the exit or killing the guards or whatever. And this is not designed to take long. It's meant to not interrupt your mapping from a pace point of view. And then you end up in the reward room. every room has a reward, and these vary from all the things we've talked about, fountains, affliction fountains, merchant, treasure room, and so on, or the offer one, which is the item deferral, and a whole bunch of other. I should add, there are a lot of other reward rooms we haven't shown in the live stream. Like the goal here is players explore and find stuff, so we only showed a subset in the announcement. And so after you've done that, you're right back into the map you were playing. And so it's a relatively quick process and does improve your Sanctum progress or give you some actual currency with each room you play.
Yeah, for some behind the scenes insight here, for this one we were specifically like, let's try and avoid spoilers as much as possible for like the things you can discover in the Forbidden Sanctum. So
Yeah.
there's a fair bit of discovery process there.
There's a lot of discovery, and there's quite a lot of story as well. Like there's an actual reason why the Sanctum is, got this bad person in there and what's going on with that. But we'd much prefer people actually enjoy that rather than us dumping it all on them here.
And bosses too. I'm very excited.
Yeah, lots of boss fights.
Ooh, lots. I was thinking there might just be like 2 or something. Very good. Official Arrow asks, do totems, when they take damage, lose your resolve? And I'll tack onto that minions as well.
No, they do not.
Great. Excellent. Does self-inflicted damage affect resolve?
I don't think it does. There's a lot of shrugging. Nah. It's only damage that's tagged with affecting your resolve, like ones from the monsters. There are some, let's say, environmental hazards in the Sanctum. You can see it briefly in some of the footage of some big model orbs flying around and so on, and that kind of thing. An object in the middle of the room that's spewing out laser beams that rotates, for example. That stuff will hurt your resolve. But it's really telegraphed. Like, it's very easy for people to deal with.
Well, there you go. That answers Monkadota's question as well. So we'll move on to the next topic, which is endgame changes. So the need to swap between bossing and mapping in the Atlas trees was definitely something that felt awkward. So I'm pretty excited to learn a bit more about that change. Many of the nodes have been rolled into the game as default now for bossing. But are there any passives that remain on the Atlas tree for bossing reward stuff? I'm guessing there are still nodes, for example, to enable the Uber versions of the various bosses, at least?
Yes, there are Uber nodes still. So if you want to play the Uber fights, you can allocate the passive. But thankfully, that's a very small investment that you wouldn't do particularly often. And the main problem, which is where you feel like you have to fully spec into bosses and then fully unspec back into mapping, which is a large investment, is not there anymore. And it's worth noting the kind of people that are doing Uber pinnacle farming can afford the regrets to flick a passive on and off from time to time. But basically, the plan is that you can play bosses at any time without feeling like you have to respec your tree or you're missing out on something.
I mean, it's also important to note that the Ubers are not the default bosses now, thankfully. Very good. Some of the allocatable boss nodes made things more challenging in addition to more rewarding. So, for example, Inevitable Ambush, which added a second Guardian to the Guardian fights. Are things like this made default behavior now, or are they still passives, or are they just gone?
The ones that add extra challenge and rewards are gone for now, but this isn't a we don't like them, they're gone forever. It's a case that we want to bring them back in some form. And we have some plans for this. They probably won't be an at 320 release, but we do have some cool ways where basically the ability to opt in to the challenge and reward is not going to come from the tree because that creates the problems we've discussed, but it will come from somewhere. And so players will be able to get their challenge and reward back for those. But in the meantime, obviously, there's still a lot of ways you can ramp up the juice and challenge from these encounters.
Jack was wondering if Atlas Tree will be viewable today alongside patch notes, or is that a little bit later maybe?
I don't think it's today, but our expectation is to release it before release so that you do get a chance to plan around it.
Okay. Reign of Pain Games asks, there was mention of boss nodes being moved from the Atlas passive tree to the bosses directly. To avoid what happened last league with loot, are there any number changes happening with the modifiers?
I'm unaware of any. I mean, we've tried very hard to communicate everything as clearly as we can in the patch notes. I mean, I can't promise we haven't missed anything, but we have scoured stuff in order to try to make sure it's complete, and also written the live stream and our information up based on this kind of stuff. So we are trying very hard to disclose any small changes like that which would have an impact. I'm not aware of any stuff we haven't spoken about there.
All right, let's talk a bit about rare monsters. I think a lot of players are very happy to read the manifesto about the replacement of the Arch Nemesis system for rare monsters with a new, more, I guess, Nemesis-like system. Do you think that this new system will still achieve the goals that you set out to achieve with Arch Nemesis, though?
So the goal of Arch Nemesis initially was modernization of the effects and their balance. We felt that the old monster mods were just really old. We just basically needed to give them a fresh coat of paint. Now, our fresh coat of paint included some stuff that players didn't like. And so we're trying very hard to make sure the new system does achieve the core goals of Arch Nemesis without having the things that people didn't like. And so to that effect, it now does use modern effects. There's a lot of cool stuff that we weren't doing with the system that was 2 systems ago, and the balance is appropriate for current Path of Exile. So it's definitely ticked those boxes, but at the same time, it's trying to be much more understandable and simple and a bit less in your face than Arch Nemesis was.
On a very kind of just like rough feelings basis, how do you think like an old Arch Nemesis compares to a new rare monster on average?
My impression so far is that the monsters are on average a bit easier, but the key thing is this: a previous Arch Nemesis mod had a grab bag of stuff that it did. It generally made the monster do more damage in a generic sense. It also had an interesting thing that happened gameplay-wise, and it added a bunch of defensive properties, and often more, often on multiple axes. And so it cohesively had a kind of a, this is a fire, it's going to screw you up with fire in 4 different ways kind of theme. And so therefore it applied to pretty much any character, right? It would have some way of interacting with them. The new mods are very simple. The new mods say, cool, you're not going to be able to do much fire damage to me, or I'm going to do a lot of fire damage to you, or I have a magma barrier. They just do one thing. And therefore, they're very, let's just say, Boolean against certain players. I'll give an example. Let's say you run into a rare monster with 2 mods, and those 2 mods are that it will blind you and that it's resistant to fire damage. So if you're playing a cold caster, neither of those mods affects you whatsoever. They're literally nothing. And so you can kill a monster easily and it doesn't do anything extra to you. Great. And on average, you're often encountering this. But if you're playing a fire melee character, it blinds you, which is going to affect your accuracy, and the fire damage is going to be mitigated against it. This will be a harder fight. It will wake you up a bit when you encounter it. And so you're going to find this situation where a lot more monsters are just speed bumps along the way and aren't causing a problem. And sometimes there'll be one which causes you issues because of your build. And so it's quite a different experience for different players. But overall, the monsters are at a glance much simpler in terms of what they do, and you're not encountering the onerous, long, frustrating fights every single area like you were before.
See, I like that because you feel good when you're playing a build and you run into a challenge. You're like, "Ha, my build doesn't care about this at all." You feel clever, even though it's just kind of the luck of the draw on that one. But yeah, that feels good. So on the modifiers, only doing what they say, fantastic. However, there still kind of remains a problem where this information is in a small text list at the top of the screen. Have you guys explored the idea of color coding the new modifiers in some way to help players identify them, or maybe using other systems like, I don't know, little symbols or maybe like color coded glows on monsters to denote certain effects and so on?
They do have visual effects on them in many cases, so you often can see what a monster does based on what it looks like. But otherwise, what we focused on here is to succinctly and completely describe what the monster does in text. And this is a list that has more words than Arch Nemesis, because Arch Nemesis would have something like Flamewalker, and then what does that mean? Who knows? You'd learn, of course, but there were 70 plus of them.
Oh, yeah.
And so now it specifically says what it does. This may mean more reading. It may not be a good endpoint here, right? It might be that we need to make the things slightly more concise, but I'm really worried about us getting back into keywording, because part of the problem with keywording was then a player can't look at the keyword and actually understand what it does. So I don't know. Longer term, there are probably solutions here. Maybe the right answer is to put some color coding back. Currently, it's not color coded. That was something which went with the keywords in Arch Nemesis. I mean, it could be restored, but we'd like people to play and give us some feedback. If you guys can suggest how the mods can be made further clear, so that you can easily identify them while you're playing, that's really useful. Have a go. We're open to feedback here. We want to make sure the monster mod system achieves our goals and is still easy to read.
Yeah, I think the color coding would be a good thing. It could be something that could be done gradually over time as well. Like you start with elementally aligned things are color coded alongside their elements, for example.
One thing we have done, and this isn't something we spoke about on the live stream, is that the text under the monsters that says like resist fire, resist cold, or vulnerable to fire, vulnerable to cold, the one that kicks in when they have approximately 15% resistance, was feeling a bit spammy alongside all these mods. Like when we're asking you to read 2 or 3 short lines of mod text, having like resist fire, resist cold underneath it as well was quite a lot. And so we've moved those to little symbols over on the right of the life bar. And so if you're the kind of character who cares about which monsters are fire resistant, you're just glancing at symbols now rather than trying to read text. And that's helped declutter it quite a bit.
So that's great. That sounds awesome. I look forward to seeing that. Yeah, it's kind of like what I was talking about. Yeah, little symbols and life bars. Great idea. Excellent. Good to know. So let's talk about the loot goblin issue. It seems like it'll be solved by players simply just not knowing which monster is going to be the big loot pinata. Good news indeed. But how do you feel about the loot conversion system overall? Because I thought this system was quite interesting, but maybe a little bit tainted by how it was implemented. So for the unfamiliar, the loot conversion system is this new system that takes what a monster would usually drop and converts it into a new type of reward, like all currency, for example.
So we've reviewed the loot conversions and added some new ones, dropped some old ones, like the ones that just gave you piles and piles of flasks, for example. As far as I know, that doesn't exist anymore. And we've gone through and made sure to use the feedback that people have had. The special. So the way it works is rare monsters drop more items than regular monsters. By itself, that should be enough reward, but we want it to be interesting, and we want people to feel like they're really, that there's an extra reason to kill rare monsters because you could otherwise ignore them. And so you basically have these bonus drops that can occur, and bonus drops include conversions, but they also include a lot of other stuff. And there's a chance of getting the bonus drops that's proportional to the mods that are on the monster. For example, if a monster has 2 mods on it, then it has 2 chances to get a bonus. If it has 4 mods, it has 4 chances to get a bonus. And the individual mods have higher chances where I believe like the more difficult ones, like for example, if there's one that's similar to one of the old Pantheon mods and that it does, like it evokes some, god who comes and smites you, for example, then it is significantly higher. There's a significantly higher chance that it's going to have a special drop here. And what you find is when a monster has, the convergence of all of the really big mods in it, it's a hard fight, that results in there being a very high chance of one of these special drops, which is potentially a conversion or potentially one of the other ones we haven't spoken about yet. And this results in a thing where you have a lot of incentive to fight rare monsters, a lot of incentive to fight hard rare monsters, but you don't feel that you can assess a monster beforehand and then try to min-max what your exact party composition should be in order to get the maximum rewards from that fight. We've also tried to smooth this out a bit more. Like the thing in the past where you could potentially, under the right circumstances, get dozens and dozens of divines from a monster, and then everyone else feels like they're getting nothing, wasn't great. So we're trying to make sure that there are still spikes, but it's a bit less spiky than before. There's a bit more spread across all of the different things, and a lot of the bad options are a bit better now.
A lot more variety too, it sounds like. Is this something you've considered doing to map bosses as well? Like, map bosses have definitely gotten better over time in terms of reward and more interesting, which I like. But it still seems like, in a lot of cases, they could get a little spicier.
It's worth looking into. Yeah, we've been focusing this cycle on trying to get the monster mods into a good place and to scrub all the arch nemesis off everything.
Yes. Oh, feels good.
Those power washing videos? It's like that.
Yeah, I'll get my gurney out and hose off the arch nemesis filth. Oh dear. Definitely threw me there. A lot of people in chat asked, how will Headhunter work with the new monster mods?
Okay, this is the first question we're expecting. There are way more mods now, and that means Headhunter players that are getting a lot of mods cap out later. Previously, because there were relatively few Arch Nemesis mods, I mean, there were still dozens to be fair, but there were fewer. Once you've got them all active, you can't get more. Whereas here, there are far more mods, and so you can have far more upper end power. Having said that, these do less than the Arch Nemesis mods because that's what you asked us to do. And so they do implicitly, like at the low end, Headhunter is less powerful. At the high end, Headhunter is more powerful. You pick which is best.
It's a kind of a slower ramp up to a higher potential sort of deal. You asked for this.
And we're calling Headhunter Val Cleave now.
Excellent. Immortalum asks, does that mean no more fractured flasks because of the flask thing being removed?
Do you happen to know that?
Well, the zero flask conversion, if not, then.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure the flask conversion is gone. That and the like piles of whetstones ones are 2 examples.
The monster drops in the fracture conversion.
Yeah.
Fracture.
Yeah, it'll fracture regular flask drops.
Okay. Simple Cookie asks, will the Atlas passive that increase the amount of mods on rare monsters be added back with the new rare monster changes?
I don't think it has been. Do you know that? Yeah. I mean, we certainly discussed it, but we want to kind of get a vanilla experience here of how many rare monster mods is appropriate, and an issue with feedback is if there are ways to juice it up and then people say there are too many mods, we don't know if they necessarily had that active. So we'll consider it for the future, but this has been a year of rare monster mods, so let's just try this new system and see if people appreciate the changes, and then we can look at further changes to it.
It's been a wild ride, Chris. All right. So recently you swapped kind of Divine and Exalted Orbs around. Now that we've had a league with the various changes surrounding these high-end currencies, I'd like to know, what were the goals of effectively swapping Divines and Exalts, and how effective have the changes been?
Well, the goals were that exalts were used more for crafting, that someone would actually consider taking an item and using an exalted orb to get another mod that is random. That's happening now, a lot more than it was before. Secondly, we wanted it to be harder to divine items, not just because we're mean, but because it makes well-rolled uniques more valuable. Previously, because divines were really accessible, well, relatively accessible, it meant that if you have a really rolled unique, it didn't really feel that special because someone can slam a few divines into it to get something like that. Now there is quite a wide variance of stuff. Like look at something like Brass Dome, for example, where the the worst versions of it are worth quite a lot less than the really good ones. And that's more fun because then you find something that's just a much better version of something that someone else has that's worth less and you feel good about that. These goals were achieved, right? Like it certainly is harder to divine items, it is easier to exalt them. The economy survived. Life goes on. We'll continue to make broad changes whenever we feel like it that affect the economy, but it's sometimes good to just cause a bit of a shift in how people value items so you don't get entrenched values. You don't get people believing, oh, this item is 6x forever. It changes because the game changes.
So for the standard players that are still coping with their stash full of exalts because they didn't convert them over in time.
This is like, seriously, like, oh, I had entirely all my money in Bitcoin and now it's worthless, right? Like, diversify, right? Again, economics.
Chris is teaching multiple economics lessons today.
Path of Exile will set you up for life. Have a diversified portfolio of currency items.
Okay.
And
It's really
currency. Keep some rares, keep some crafting stuff. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you got to invest in some high-end one-of-a-kind items, right?
Some old skin maps, maybe alternate.
Oh, yeah.
I found out I have this red beak on my account from the early race seasons. Like I'm talking, I logged in to do races back in 2013 to literally test they were working and got an alternate art red beak, and now it's worth a mirror in standard.
Wait, is it? I'm pretty sure I have one of those.
Well, I mean that was just with a quick search, but yeah. So invest in a variety of different items in your standard portfolio if you don't want to get wrecked by economic changes.
If only I played in standard, I'd be rich. It's so good. It's interesting to see some new Vars skills. It's certainly been a while. I tried to look up exactly when, and I think 3.3 Incursion was the last time, which was get ready, 17 leagues ago. So powerful, longer cooldown or like ultimate skills can make gameplay quite a bit more engaging, I think. And a lot of people love Vars skills for that reason. It's certainly an underutilized skill category, though, not something you add new skills to all the time. So how do you decide then whether to make a skill a Vars skill or just a regular skill that does a similar thing?
Well, if we're trying to come up with an ultimate skill, Val skills are ones that we have a control over you only using periodically, whereas regular skills, we generally don't put big cooldowns on them unless there's a bypassable thing. So if it's something where there's a good cooldown bypass mechanism, then it will probably be a regular skill. Now, the thing we're doing with Val skills here is we want to buff melee. There are a number of you may be thinking, wow, that's a lot of changes to melee, or you may be thinking, where are all the melee changes, depending on whether you happen to notice stuff. But the changes to endgame unique weapons affect melee. The Val skill stuff affects melee in a way I'll discuss in a second. There's a bunch of other bits and pieces, like melee splash is being added to as a node on the passive tree. And we have some, I'm not supposed to talk about the details because it's secret, but you'll find there's some totem mastery that affects melee in an interesting way. So there's a few bits and pieces that together actually do make quite a cohesive set of melee buffs. But the theory with the Val ones is we targeted a set of weaker melee skills where previously, if the player is using that skill, they just do the damage they were doing. And rather than just saying, oh, we're going to give the skill a little bit more damage, which has various issues, we've created a Val version, which at face value means that every X attacks, you get to do a more powerful one, which is an indirect buff. But we've tried to design many of these Val skills so that they also directly buff the main version. Like Val Cleave is an example where if you're using Val Cleave occasionally, your cleaves themselves are more powerful. And so it's doing a more powerful attack sometimes and increasing the power of your other attacks the rest of the time. And because of the change where using the Val gem gives you the regular version of the skill, then there's no excuse not to be using Val Cleave if you were playing a Cleave character. And so overall, there are a lot of Val skills there that cause melee characters to be quite a lot more powerful. It also meant that we could, for example, target skills that we felt needed it. Now, when you see the patch notes in a little bit, you'll notice there's a small nerf to Lightning Strike, right? And you may be thinking, well, if we're trying to buff melee, what are you doing nerfing Lightning Strike? And the answer is it's far, 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 far better than the other melee skills. And so we're buffing the category, but that doesn't mean that every skill needs to come out entirely, entirely with additional damage on it. And so you'll find that melee overall is more powerful, but within the melee category, there's quite a lot more options available than there were before.
All right. So yeah, you like file cleaves a little underutilized, +2 radius not enough. We'll just give it a mini headhunter. Well, that'll help. Should do. Evolve skills then a concept that's likely to carry forth into Path of Exile 2 with its altered skill fit, a system even.
No comment.
Okay. Nice. Frozen Legion is a pretty big news as well. So to clarify for people who missed a particular detail about it, it's actually a spell that summons statues that then attack with your weapon, right?
Yep, that's
Super
correct.
cool. A spell attack. So you've done it now. There's nothing to stop you from casting a spell that shoots your bow's arrow or attack that casts a spell that then does another attack. So is this something you're going to explore more potentially?
I'd say consider this as a hint at the way we're designing some Path of Exile 2 skills.
A little bit more going on. I like it. Very cool. We have a couple extra chat questions here. Oh, everyone was asking about divine shards. Yeah, I see your chat. I see you spamming divine shards. Okay, everyone wants to know, are divine shards going to be a thing? All right. Chris?
They're called Chaos Orbs. Shards have problems. Okay, so we designed Path of Exile to get away from the concept of there being a homogeneous gold currency in games, right? And I understand every league we do, we introduce gold in it, but that's, within the confines of that particular scope. But overall, in main Path of Exile, we want to make sure that the currency items have fluctuating values relative to each other. It's very important as part of the way that trade works. And so taking something like Divine Orbs that are the de facto currency for high-end trades and adding a granular, proportional, like Divine Sense thing is not something that we would do unless there was a good reason for it. And so we'd have no plans to add divine shards. We think it would potentially be negative. It's okay to use cheaper currency as the divine shards. Like you can take chaos orbs and turn them into divines through trade or other mechanisms. The value fluctuates, but that's what we want it to be doing.
All right. Booze Addicts asks, do the clones from the new skills count as minions? That'll be the Frozen Legion. I only ever saw them referred to as statues.
They do not.
The clones
Right.
like Val Double Strike or General Strike.
Yeah, so it's like Val Double Strike, for example.
The attack on to plane asks, does Val Flicker attack one target multiple times? So does it have like boss applications then, or is it more about pack clear?
Can hit the same target more than once, so on a boss, every single target.
Yeah. Against a single target, it will do every single hit against that target.
Very anime. Cool.
Mhm.
Okay.
It is very anime, yes.
Let's talk crafting and league mechanics a little bit. So challenge leagues in Path of Exile have always been a place for you guys to experiment with systems. Some of them intended to go core, if they work out, for example, but otherwise, others are like never really intended to go core and they're just specifically for that. But even in that case, I imagine there's a chance that they can give you some useful information to inform future design. So crafting systems have been a bit of a trend lately, I notice, with leagues, like Sentinel Recombinators, for example, and Lake of Calandra Mirroring. Some of these crafting systems end up being particularly liked by the players too. I think people really like the Recombinators. Are these sorts of new crafting systems designed with becoming core features in mind, or are they more experiments to explore future design possibilities? And is crafting systems something that you're keen to keep experimenting with?
We want to introduce something new in every league, a new way of getting items, or a new thing you can do with items. We found that if we leave it in the game just as a de facto thing, then you accumulate dozens and dozens and dozens of systems that create both power creep and complexity creep for the way the crafting works. And that's good. Path of Exile is meant to have that stuff, and power creep is natural, and there's no big problem there. But we have found that introducing stuff like recombinators and then turning it off until we've had a good think about how it fits in is probably safer. Like a lot of expectations with Harvest would have been reduced if we hadn't reintegrated it into the game before we were ready to and before we fully understood the consequences of that. And so with the mist from Lake of Calandra or the recombinators, we are looking for ways that we can bring them back. And we do plan to continue to introduce systems like this, some of which will stick around, some of which won't. An example is sanctified relics in the Sanctum offer a lot of character power, and that's a Sanctum-specific thing. We don't expect that sanctified relics will necessarily exist after Sanctum is finished. Maybe we make it core, maybe we don't, maybe we keep them, maybe we don't, but they're a thing for that league that let you experiment with builds that you otherwise wouldn't be able to. There are a lot of things in there which let you push your build further than you normally would, and that's something that's cool about the Sanctum League. It may be that it becomes a permanent part of Path of Exile later, and we are looking for ways to bring stuff back. Like, I don't know if this is actually a thing, but at least in our planning, one of the things that the monster mods could cause, you know how they have those special drops that occur that we were speaking about a few minutes ago, one of the things that they could drop was the mist that mirrors from Calandra, for example, the one that gives you the 2 currency items. I don't know what form that will be in. If it's in 320, we're still sorting out the details of some of the exotic ones like that. But that's an example of us taking a system that was used as a reward mechanic for a league and then making it a rare reward from another system in the game.
Cool. Speaking of things that potentially can come back in the future, is there any word on Ultimatum?
Ultimatum is split into 2 pieces. There's the boss fights with the uniques. They're back in the game, as of like last league, I think, or the one before. Time is a blur. And then there's the actual Ultimatum mechanic. Now, we have a plan for the Ultimatum mechanic, and we mentioned there is a plan for a while, and that plan is not due yet, but it is coming at some point until it changes. Having said that, the offer/deferral system in Sanctum does feel a lot like it. This is where we say, here is a thing, or you can keep going in order to double it, essentially, but with quite a lot more doubling going on. And so players who liked the risk of Ultimatum will certainly like that mechanic.
Interesting. Yeah, I can see the parallel there. Very briefly, just 2 small questions on Ruthless. How has the player interest and reception been to the Ruthless Alpha from your perspective?
The alpha testers are very positive. That's really good to see. I'm glad to see they're enjoying it. And hopefully those who couldn't get into the alpha and who are interested in that mode can have a chance to check it out when it launches alongside 320.
All right. Is Ruthless a mode that you want to keep making changes to long term, like rebalancing skills specifically for the mode, for example?
We will do some Ruthless specific skill balance. Currently, the focus was on getting fundamentals in place, like getting the mode to function. And then if we find time later, we'll be able to use it to make whatever changes are needed on specific skills. And to some extent, with, as you know, with the way Path of Exile works, if there's a skill that's dominant and somewhat trivializing stuff, then we won't have any qualms about ruthlessly nerfing that in that mode. Now, there's a fundamental philosophy difference, right? A player who's playing the main game will get upset if we nerf their skills. And this is because it's the way they like to play Path of Exile. If we just decide we hate minion characters one day, then all these people who come to Path of Exile to enjoy playing minion characters as a reliable way they can engage with the game would be upset that now they can't do the thing they like. In Ruthless, all bets are off. We will make whatever changes we feel like, and it will stay hard, and you will have to adapt. And, you know, the Ruthless players are big boys. They can deal with this. And it should be fine. So we will make some skill-specific changes, and very likely that those changes are not the same as balance changes that we do in the core game. In the core game, we want to make sure all the archetypes are viable and there's good diversity and that kind of stuff. But in Ruthless, we have other objectives.
I'm going to spam you with some uncategorized random questions from chat now.
Right.
Kyle MC asks, how does quantity and rarity affect the Sanctum? And I'll append to that another question I saw someone ask. Map mods don't affect the Sanctum, right? It's a separate zone.
Yeah, your map mods do not affect the Sanctum. Quantity and rarity on your character will affect your drops you get from the monsters, I believe, right? There are monsters in the Sanctum that you can kill, and they drop items. So it's not like, you know, the goal is that when you're mapping, it doesn't reduce the amount of item drops you're getting by going and playing in the Sanctum. You do get drops, and those monsters are technically unique monsters, so technically they're pretty juiced, and quantity and rarity do affect that. So going into the Sanctum, killing some monsters is roughly similar to killing monsters in the map that you came from, plus all the Sanctum rewards on top.
Nice. Damaris asks, how endgame is the new mechanic? So that'd be Sanctum. Does that encounter that on like the first beach as you start the campaign, or is it kick in later?
Yeah, kicks in right at the beginning. So basically, you start doing your first Sanctum at level like 2 or whatever, you know, as you get into the coast, and you probably won't get very far in those Sanctum runs, but it's a good opportunity to start learning. Start accumulating some relics and so on, and you'll need them because later on it gets really hard. There are some things in the Sanctum, like the special endgame uniques, that can only be dropped if you are very high in maps, because they're very, very powerful pinnacle things. But yeah, it does play throughout the entire campaign.
Great. El Swego asks, if Soul Taker is going to be so insanely rare, what does this mean for Kingmaker, the item that you can make out of Soul Taker?
I'm just going to smile. We thought of that one.
Oh, okay. Mystery.
Maybe it's been buffed as well.
Oh, okay. Something to be revealed potentially then, I'm getting, chat. Will our Star Forges or Line Eyes Glares sitting in Standard be buffable to their Headhunter tier strengths with a Divine Orb?
Yep. I know
Nice.
it's stupid, isn't it? But we had to do that because it's fair and because of divination cards that you could have been hoarding and all the other things. So yeah, you get some free ridiculous items in standard if you had diversified into them.
Standard chat trade is exploding right now. Excellent.
Someone says stonks. That's great.
Okay. FDXPO asks, with endgame unique weapons becoming more rare, what about their respective divination cards like Starforges, for example?
Yes, we are adjusting the divination cards. This means in standard, the old divination cards are now worth more.
All right. Man with Hat, any plans to decouple melee from buffs granted by totems, Ancestral Protector, and War Chief?
This is actually a hot topic internally. I don't know the answer. Like, I think it's the case where our designers acknowledge this is a problem and are looking for solutions, but maybe we've doubled down on it a little bit in this one because of that totem mastery I mentioned before. You'll see what I mean.
Wait and see. Doug Izzle asks, will Ruthless launch on console at League launch too?
I believe so. Yeah.
Great. Lots of ultimatum questions, which we already asked. Theory Crafter and many other people ask, is Reforge keep prefix/suffix coming back in some shape or form? Speaking of things coming back.
I'm not aware of it coming back. No, sorry.
Okay. And is there any ETA on the next mystery box release from Forest Bishop?
It's likely to be at the League launch or within a day or so of it.
All right. Spooky asks, Chris, can you please share your current thoughts on the loss of the historic buff to loot? There you go. That's a big one.
So this is one of those tricky things where, like,
I was muted the whole time.
we feel people completely misunderstood what is there, and like we didn't want to go on a big rant and try to correct people, but we posted some numbers at some point during the league and then left it. But it boils down to this: if you're a regular player
I
playing regular
think I'm
content, as we
done
can see
with
based on like
this.
looking